Hey guys, welcome to the next video in our pre-release guide for the upcoming Magic the Gathering set, Guilds of Ravnica. Today we are going to break down the Golgari and Selesnya guilds. If you missed it, last night we released a video for the Izzet and Boros guilds, so you can go ahead and check out the video here. I'll link off to it. But today we are talking about the Golgari and Selesnya. So without further ado, let's jump right in. We got a lot of cards to talk about, and we're going to start with Golgari, which Golgari's got they've got some pretty good cards, and in the other three guilds, I think we had some splashable color suggestions and things like that, but Golgari really has it they've got a really nice package of creatures, removal, draw, things like that, a really solid all-around guild. So let's go ahead and get it together here with the uncommons. These three cards are fantastic cards by their own rights. So if you open them, you will play them, and this is what's going to drive you into Golgari if you in fact did not get any of your guild colors or guild cards, anything like that, besides your sealed pack. And if you're drafting, these are the cards that you're going to want to look for to help guide you into Golgari. So Glowspawn Shaman is first. It's a 3/1 for green-black. It's an elf. When it enters the battlefield, you put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard. You may put a land card from your graveyard on top of your library. We'll talk about the ramp and I guess I should put in quotes, the quote-unquote ramp spells and ramp creatures and things like that, because there's really not a lot of it. But this is a decent card. It's above the curve, 3 damage on turn 2. It's not too bad if you can find a way to get it in the air or find a way to give it a little bit more on the defensive. It's a positive card. Putting creatures in the graveyard, putting cards in your graveyard is what this guild is all about. So this is a great card. It's going to trade up every time in combat, and if it gets through in combat, 3 damage is nothing to scoff at. Golgari Fine Broker is next. It's black, green for a 3/4. So they're not too shabby. It's another elf. When it enters the battlefield, return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. So this is a great way to kind of get back your bomb rare creature, your late game finisher. Maybe maybe 2 turns before you shamaned it to your graveyard with those 3 cards. This is a great way to kind of get those cards back and have a decent body on the battlefield at the same time. Swarm Guildmage is next. It's a 2/2 for 2 mana, 1 green, 1 black. This one's interesting because you can pay 5, creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain menace until end of turn. So this is kind of like a pseudo evasion type of ability. And then also in the early game, you can kind of gain some incremental life. You probably won't be doing that too often until you get to the point where you really don't need to play, use all your mana. You can kind of hold 2 back and keep this back, and then gain the life incrementally. And it's not. And normally I would say it's not the gain life isn't what you want to be doing, but the way this card closes out games is how you're going to want to use it. So playing this on turn 2 isn't necessarily the best case scenario. Best case scenario is playing this on turn 6, turn 7, right after or right before you're about to play your swarm. Like you've got your 3 or 4 creatures already on the battlefield. You play this, play your big guy, pass the turn, and then go to town. So all these are fantastic cards. So kind of going up the curve, Golgari's got some very versatile, very unique creatures that they have access to in black and green at all different mana costs, right? All different converted mana costs. So Proliferating Imp is first. It's a 1/1 for 1 black mana with flying. So right there, it's not the greatest card. Right, flying is great, but if Golgari, they've got a couple ways to buff their creatures, and there's a couple Selesnya cards that kind of carry over into green that they can utilize But its second ability is kind of what you're looking for. You can pay 1 black, 1 colorless, tap it, sacrifice the imp. Target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-land card from it. That player discards that card, and you can only activate this when you can play a sorcery. So basically, you can remove their best thing, right? So you play this on turn 1, get maybe a hit or 2 in on turn 2, turn 3, and then it based on their board presence, like if they haven't played too much, or if they if they're mana screwed or whatever, you can take their next play or whatever. So like in some cases it's not like you can really kind of play the board, right? So if they missed a land drop or whatever, and you can attack in twice or whatever, and then on turn 4 rather, if they're still behind they're obviously still behind on land. You can look at what their land count is. Like if they've got 2 land in play and it's turn 4, you're going to take their 3 drop. You're going to take their 4 drop. They're not necessarily going to take their bomb rare, because that thing wasn't going to come out anytime soon. You want to get it to the point where they're not going to play something for a couple more consecutive turns. And like I said, turn 4, then turn 5, then turn 6, you're just laying out creature after creature after creature, and just kind of putting the game away that way. So don't play this incorrectly. Don't play this on turn 1, then turn 2 immediately sack it. That I think is that right there, I believe, is probably going to be your worst case scenario. You want to see how the board plays out. Now, if they're hitting their land drops, like let's say, turn 1 they play a land and play something, turn 2 they play a land and place a 2 drop, and then turn 3 rolls around, you probably want to use it there, and then you can kind of get a lay of the land, right? But if they're missing land drops, this will definitely close out the game quicker than if you took out their biggest thing. Burglar Rat is next. It's a 1/1 for 2 mana, and when it enters the battlefield, each opponent discards a card. So this is, it's a common. It's a great card. It's a great card to play, on turns, turn 2, you're going to get their worst thing. But kind of like with the Imp, you want to play it sparingly. Just because you don't want to get their crappy 2 drop or their crappy 1 drop or whatever, or maybe they've got an extra land that they want to get rid of or something like that. You want to wait till that turn 4, turn 5, play out your curve, and then you play this out and assume that you're going to get their bomb rare or their 5 or 6 drop or whatever that they're not going to be able to cast for a while. So this is more kind of a mid to late game play versus a turn 2 play. The other thing to keep in mind is during 2-headed giant, you're going to get 2 cards for 1, so that's always a great ratio. So play as many of these as you possibly can in your Golgari decks, in your black decks for that matter, in 2-headed giant. Veiled Shade is next. This is a 2/2 for 3 mana. It's at common. This is just a great way to dump your mana late game, right? It doesn't have flying, which is unfortunate, but there's different ways to kind of get it through for damage, and things like that. Whether it's using the Guild Mage or whatever for menace, or it's just pumping this up and attacking it into a bunch of creatures and trying to get rid of some of their stuff. The threat of activation is a real thing on this, right? So theoretically, play this on turn 3, turn 4. If you hit your land drop, you're looking at a 4/4, attacking that turn. So obviously attack in, and if they don't block, then pump it up, depending on what they block with, play accordingly. So good card. Moving on, a couple more 3s and 4 drops. This is a great card right here. This is Pitless Gorgon is a 2/2 with Death Touch for 3 mana. This thing just kind of sits back and it requires a removal spell, right? You're not attacking with this. You're sitting back and just waiting for them to attack, right? This is going to require them to kill it with one of their removal spells. If you can, take a couple hits of damage, and wait for them to play their big spell, kind of take the 2 and 3 points of damage for a couple turns, while you play out your bigger threats. Keep this back for their 5 or their 6 drop. That way it can hold that thing back while you find an answer for it. That doesn't require the Gorgon. Bats is next. It's a 3/1 with flying. It's 4 mana. This is kind of a rough creature, right? It's got flying, which is great, but the defense is just it's so weak, so weak. But the nice thing about this, and the way, and I've actually got this backwards as far as the presentation is concerned, but Spinal Centipede and the bats work really, really well together, and they're both common, which is great. If you can curve into it, this is the best. This is the best option. So turn 3, play the Centipede, 3/2. Turn 4, play the bats pre-combat, and then attack with the Centipede, hoping that it will die. When it dies, put a +1/+1 counter on the bats, making it a 4/2. Infinitely better. Then on turn 5, you're now attacking for 4 additional, 4 damage to 3. The likelihood of it dying to any card that they have is less likely because of the one defense. So that's the perfect case scenario for these 2 cards for sure. Let's see here. Erstwhile Trooper is next. A 2/2 for 3 mana, 1 generic, 1 black, 1 green. At common, it's a zombie soldier. Discard a creature card. It gets +2/+2 and gains trample until end of turn. You can only activate it once a turn. This is an interesting card for getting creatures into your graveyard. That's the 4/4 for 3 is okay. Trample is great. It's going to get through a lot of creatures. Hopefully it kills creatures and survives. That's the biggest thing. But I can see people discarding creatures to get them into your graveyard, right? To build up your undergrowth abilities or undergrown abilities. So I could see this. So don't be afraid to use its ability and not attack with it if it doesn't make sense, right? So if they have a 5/5 on the battlefield, don't feel like you have to discard a creature, pump this, and attack in unless you have another pump spell to take care of that 5/5. If you do, then more power to you. But don't feel like you have to send this thing to the gallows because it's a free sack outlet that doesn't come along very often. Although it is only once a turn, you can activate it during your opponent's turn, so keep that in mind, even though the trample isn't relevant. So that's also a thing that you might be able to catch off 1 or 2 of your opponents. The Generous Strays next. This is kind of a catch-all card in green. You'll play this in every green deck. Enters a battlefield, it replaces itself. It's a creature that you can put into the graveyard. It's a chump blocker early game, things like that. So 2 or 3 of these, they get significantly worse after the third, so just be cautious of that. Underseeing Necrolist is next. It's a zombie lizard for 4 mana. It's a 3/3. You can pay 1, sacrifice another creature, put a +1/+1 counter on the Necrolist. It gains a menace until end of turn. Activate this ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery. So you can cast it multiple times a turn. Which is good, but you just can't cast it during your opponent's turn. Again, it's kind of rough because you have to pay for it to sack the creature. Whereas with the Trooper, it's discarding a creature card. So with this one, it's the plus ability is great because it sticks around on the Necrolist. However, you have to pay for that creature, and then I have a feeling like the strays are going to be eaten by the Necrolist, right? So you're going to play the stray, draw your card, and then chump block, pay 1, sacrifice it. Actually, you wouldn't be able to chump block because it's sorcery only. So it's the stray is going to basically feed the Necrolist at this point, right? So you'll pay 3, get your card, pay 1, put a +1/+1 counter on it. That's about it, right? That's about it. And then attack in. So next up, we've got some of our bigger creatures. These are kind of our mid to late game quote unquote finishers. The finishers on the next slide. But Razam Lurcher is next. It's a 2/2 for 2 generic, 1 black, 1 green. It's a common zombie fungus or fungus zombie. It's got undergrowth, and when it enters a battlefield with a +1/+1 counter equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard. So this is where you're gonna want to make sure that your strays and all of those creatures are in your graveyard. Because if you can get this to like a 4/4 or 5/5, that's huge. And then granting it menace or some type of evasion is another way to kind of take it a step further. Giving it trample is another possibility. But there's a lot going on here. And if you're playing your deck right, if you're building your deck correctly, this can easily, by turn 4, turn 5, be a 4/4 without any shadow of doubt, for sure. So, creatures dying to combat, creatures being sacrificed or discarded, milling, stuff like that. So Golgari Raiders is next. Similar concept, 0/0 for 4 mana with haste, which is really weird to see on a green card. It's uncommon. The undergrowth is it gets a +1/+1 counter on it for each creature card in your graveyard. So very, very similar to the Lurcher. However, just you can't play. Obviously, you have to play this with creatures in your graveyard, otherwise it's going to die. So it starts out a little bit weaker because it starts out weaker, obviously, because it's a 0/0, but it has that haste ability. So, like, if turn 4, you've got 3 creatures or 2 creatures in your graveyard, I would probably recommend playing the Lurcher and then waiting till turn 5 or turn 6 when you can fill up your graveyard a little bit more and get this thing a little bit heavier on the attack and defense, and then play it and hopefully attack in. Maybe you can kind of work in some spells where you can tap down creatures, or Black's got some we'll talk about their removal spells. Really have some solid access to remove their creatures before you play this. That way you can get that utilize that haste ability. Crawl Swarm is next. This is an interesting card, kind of like the Bats. It's a 4/1 instead of a 3/1, but it's got flying. It's 5 mana. You can pay 3, discard a creature card, and return it from your graveyard to your hand. So it's got recursion, and that's kind of why I'm classifying this more as like kind of a finisher card, because it has flying and because it's got recursion. It's a little bit pricey on the discard a creature card. But the nice thing about this is if you mill this into your deck, or maybe you discard it to fuel, your other cards, +1/+1 abilities, you can recur this back. So the ones that allow you, get +2/+2 until end of turn for discarding a card, that's for free. You could pay 3 to get this back. Obviously, you have to discard a creature card to get it back. So at the end of the day, maybe you shouldn't be doing that. Maybe you should just be saving your swarm and just be using this ability when it dies in combat, or a removal spell, or if you mill it. Yeah, that's probably the best option there. So let's see here. Molder Hulk is next. This is your finisher at the uncommon for sure. It's 9 mana for 6/6, but it costs 1 less for each creature card in your graveyard. And then when it enters the battlefield, return target land card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It's such a weird ability. That second ability is so weird. It doesn't have any type of evasion or trample or anything like that. It's just a big dumb creature that you can get on the battlefield for dirt cheap. I'm kind of curious to see if someone can get this in play for 2 mana. If you can get 7 creatures in your graveyard and drop this for 2 mana and then get a land back, like that's just, you build your deck strong. Lotleth Giant is next. This is another big dumb creature. Although it does have a great ability, 7 mana, gets you a 6/5. When it enters the battlefield, deals 1 damage to target opponent for each creature card in your graveyard. So if you can get 5 or 6 creatures in your graveyard by turn 8, turn 9, and drop this, that's a good chunk of health, and if you've attacked properly in the early game, that could quickly finish the game. If the end of the battlefield doesn't finish them, the crackback on the attack after you untap is gonna be a thing, right? Definitely gonna be a positive sway in your thing. So definitely a finisher by my standards. Next up, is removal, and I talked about this a little bit earlier. Black has got some really solid removal, cheap, efficient removal. Necrotic Wound is up first. It's 1 black for an uncommon instant. It's got Undergrowth. Target creature gets -X until end of turn, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard. If that creature would die this turn, exile it instead. So the exiling is a positive thing. Kind of gets back from the recursion crap. There's still some spells that count exiles in the is it colors, but if don't be afraid to play this like in post combat to take care of a creature, right? If they've got their big creature, like let's say they've got a 6/6 and you've got 2 creatures in your graveyard and a 3/3. If you attack into the 6/6, they block it, or if they attack with it and you block it, that creature goes to the graveyard. You can then instant speed remove it, right? Because that gives you 3 creatures in your graveyard. 3 damage from the combat plus -3/-3 will take care of that 6/6. So don't be afraid. I mean, I know that's the worst case scenario, right? That's 2 for 1ing yourself, but that 3/3 wasn't going to do anything anyway with a 6/6 on the battlefield. Unless it had some type of evasion where it's not going to race well essentially against the 6/6, and you can only take so many hits from a creature of that size. On the flip side of the coin, though, best case scenario, you fill up your graveyard, and for 1 mana, you just kill anything. Whether it has indestructibility, flying, I mean, there's no protection from black in this. There's very little hexproof. So besides the hexproof, like there's really not a lot that's going to stop this. But yeah. So Hired Prisoners next. Poisoners next. It's 1/1 for 1 black. It's a creature with Death Touch. Again, kind of like the Gorgon. You'll play every one of these cards. Just because it just holds back. It just holds back so much, and it requires an answer, right? So like you'll play this on turn 1, and it'll be just as effective as if you played it on turn 5 or 6, right? And because they're gonna require you they're gonna require an answer, right? So they attack with their 1/1. You don't block it, right? Take 1 damage. Turn 2, you lay down a 2/2. Now you can block their 2/2, right? You're gonna be playing 1 turn behind, but once you get into those later levels and develop your board a little bit, they're just playing bigger creatures, and you've got the better removal because you're in Golgari. And you can answer those creatures. This is kind of like an insurance plan. Hired Poisoner is like an insurance plan. Play every one that you get. They're fantastic. They're a pain in the ass to play around. And nothing is better than seeing that look on your opponent's face. Deadweight is next. This is a reprint. Solid card. -2/-2 to enchant creature for 1 black mana. Play every one you get. This is the card that you use to get rid of those pesky 1 and 2 drops that you don't want to use your Hired Poisoner, right? Use Deadweight. Get rid of them with Deadweight. The other thing that you can use this on, if you're not going to use it as a removal spell, on their flyers, to kind of cut back on the damage that you take from flyers. But if you can, the best case scenario is using this as a removal spell. You don't want to you want to try to keep this from staying on the battlefield for too long, with all the bounce and the +1/+1 counters. It'll get overrun pretty darn quick. So if you can use it as a removal spell, best case scenario right there. Next up, we've got a couple other removal-esque spells. Ortran Assassin's Neck is a 1/1 for 3 mana, Death Touch. All creatures able to block the assassin do so. Play this late game, and if you can pump it, great. That's like the best thing, right? If you open 2 of these, it's worth putting in pump spells, right? Normally I would say in Golgari, don't worry about the pump spells. Or not pump spells or +1/+1 counters like to this creature, because creatures just the smaller creatures die so quickly, and that's what you kind of want to fill your graveyard with these 1, 2, and 3 drops. But if you open up or have two or more of these cards, play all of them first of all. But look at your +1/+1 and your pump spells till end of turn plus whatever, because if you can give the assassin the ability to take down 2 or 3 or more creatures, like if you can give this +3/+3 and take down 4 creatures, you just 2 for 4. Like that's amazing. That's a good trade-off. Or even if you can take down 2 creatures, right? 2 for 2. That's another good outcome. But at the very least, 3 mana to get rid of their best thing on the battlefield will win every time. When should you play this? I wouldn't play this on turn 3 unless they have like developed their board to the point where they're playing 4 or 5 drops, which will be difficult. But there are decks that do it. Green has got some interesting cards, that let them, not as a mana ramp, but cheat creatures in with like Convoke and things like that. But if you play this on turn 5 or turn 6 and then pass, untap with it and then attack, you've got a better chance of removing their bigger threat. On top of that, you can use this as a way to win, right? So if you play this on turn 6 or turn 7, pass the turn, untap, and then attack in with everybody, all the things have to block the assassin. Therefore, everybody else gets through for damage. So it kind of works as a 1-2 punch in that sense. Undercity Uprising is next. It's 4 mana. Creatures you control gain Death Touch until end of turn. Then target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. It's a sorcery, so you can't use it as a combat trick, which is unfortunate. But this is just a great way to say, I'm going to kill your best thing with my worst thing, and then I'm going to attack with everything else and make combat horrible for you. Affectionate Indrake is next. It's 6 mana for a 4/4. When it enters the battlefield, you may have it fight target creature you don't control. So basically, it's going to take down their 1, 2, 3 in some of their 4 drops. And then your best case scenario is trying to take down one of those creatures, and keeping this 4/4 back as far as keeping it alive. So make sure, unless of course if they have a flyer, 4/4 flyer, by all means, Indrake, sorry buddy, but you're taking down the flyer, and that's the best case scenario right there. Next up, we've got a couple trap cards that I kind of want to warn people about, because these cards seem good at first glance, and newer players will be like, "Oh yeah, this is great." They're and the sad thing is they're all commons, so you're going to get a ton of them, right? So Vicious Rumors is next. 1 black for a sorcery. It deals 1 damage to each opponent. Each opponent discards a card, then puts the top card from their library into their graveyard. You gain 1 life. That is a lot of text for 1 mana, right? For 1 mana, that's doing a lot. It really is. When I first saw, I was like, wow, you're getting 1 damage, you're getting 1 card, and they're milling a card, and you're getting a life. That is a lot for 1 mana. But you have to remember one important thing. This set is 3 out of the 5 guilds wants things in their graveyard, right? They want things in their graveyard. At least they care about things in their graveyard. So each opponent discarding card, you're going to get their worst card possible, right? And then, which they get to choose. Again, giving choices to your opponent is never a good thing. They have to mill the top card of their library, which, most decks are like, hey, the Izzet decks, and the red decks that are running jumpstart cards, you're like, okay, well, I'm going to mill this card, and there's a 35% chance that it has Jumpstart, or a 30% chance it has Jumpstart, and then they can just cast it from their graveyard. Whoopity-doo. And then it also deals 1 damage to each opponent. That's 1 mana for 1 damage. Gain. There could be an argument for the gain life, right? So it's a 2-point life swing. It gets better in Two-Headed Giant, but I still think you're better off playing some type of removal, something else, a creature to help fill your graveyard. This is the type of spell that you want to leave out and put a creature in, especially in Golgari. Severed Strands is next. It's two mana for a sorcery, black. It's kind of a reprint. We've seen this effect before. As an additional cost to cast a spell, you have to sacrifice a creature. So when you pay the 2 mana, you have to sack a creature. If the card gets countered, tough luck. You're out a creature and you're out your mana. What the card actually does, though, is you gain life equal to the sacrificed creature's toughness, and then destroy target creature an opponent controls. So they added on that first part, you gain life equal to the sacrificed creature, to kind of make, and they added a mana to it, because this type of spell usually only costs 1 black to destroy target creature an opponent controls with sacrificing a creature. The gaining life thing, the reason why I think this is a trap is because, especially for newer players, they're going to be like, oh, well, I've got a 4/4 on the battlefield. I can sacrifice it, gain 4 life, destroy a creature, destroy their best thing. Like, but at the end of the day, you know, is the 4/4 holding back a 5/5? Like, is the person not attacking into your 5/5 because you have 3 cards in hand and because you have open mana? That's really kind of what you need to think about, right? Is what does your opponent think you have in your hand, right? If you've got this card in your hand, right, and you've got untapped mana, are they gonna attack in? Or are they gonna risk you giving a creature -1/-1, or, you know, instant speed removal or whatever? Or are they gonna get blown out? That's what you need to be thinking about. But again, kind of like with the rumors, like, rather than playing this card, play a creature that you can put into your graveyard to make your undergrowth cards better. Right? I think, I mean, even like the crappiest undergrowth card, like the D's and like the 2s out of, 2 out of 5 cards, are significantly better. The creatures are significantly better than these 2 cards. Now, Never Happened. This is an interesting card because originally I put it on here because I thought it was a trap card. But the more and more I think about it, the more I kind of think that it's not that bad as a one of, but gets significantly worse further on you go, right? So 3 mana sorcery common, target opponent reveals their hand, you choose a non-land card from it. So let me repeat that. You choose a non-land card from that player's graveyard or hand and exile it, right? So if they've got graveyard shenanigans going on, like, like I said, 3 out of the 5 guilds care about graveyards or have some type of graveyard interaction. This takes care of that card in their graveyard. Plus, you get to look at their hand and possibly remove something. So it's adding the graveyard to it makes it significantly better, right? Because if it was just your hand, right, and you played this on turn 3, you can take something out of their hand and, like, maybe you got something good, maybe you didn't. But later on in the game, this card gets significantly worse, especially when they're just top decking or whatever, and you play this and they like so what if they drew a land, or what if they drew a crappy spell that they just kept back or whatever, especially since people are going to be keeping cards back for abilities like Jumpstart to discard. So the fact that they added graveyard makes this a little bit better. So I would say maybe play one of these, but no more. No more. Because it gets better, later on in the game. So, all right, let's move over to Selesnya. Conclave Guild Mage is next. And first up, let's talk a little bit about finishers, right? One of the things that we've talked about constantly in these videos is, how do you finish the game? What do you use to finish the game? And this card right here, playing this card on turn 5, turn 6, and giving your creatures the following turn, trample, and ending the game, that's how you win games, right? The second ability, creating 2/2 elf knight creature tokens, that's meh. I mean, it is a thing. There are some, this set does, or this is a guild uses Convoke, so there is some meaning behind it. But at the end of the day, if you're paying 6 mana to create a 2/2 to use for Convoke, wouldn't you just use the 6 mana to cast the damn creature. So I don't like the second ability. I think it's kind of throwaway. There are some abilities, there are some Anthem abilities that can possibly get this up to a 3/3. Maybe in the Magical Christmas Land a 4/4, but again, you're paying 6 mana. So 6 mana for a 4/4 is still pretty bad, even if it has Vigilance. Conclave Cavalier is next. It's 2 green, 2 white for a 4/4. So right there, fantastic card. It's got Vigilance, even better. And when it dies, you get 2/2 green white elf knight tokens with Vigilance. So yeah, it just kind of splits off into some weird half man, half horse thing. These are good. This is a good card. I mean, 4/4 for 4 with Vigilance is just textbook, B. World Soul Colossus is an elemental, X green white for uncommon with Convoke. Enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. So the more creatures you can tap for it, the more mana you tap for X, the better off you're gonna be. Of course, it doesn't have trample, but like I said, Guildmage is here to stay, is here to give this thing trample. So play those things as often as you possibly can. Next up, we've got the Shieldmate. This is a 2/2 with Vigilance for 2. And one of the things before we kind of get into this slide that you'll notice, Selesnya, they've got a lot of value creatures at every converted mana cost. Like, we're talking options here. Like, good bodies, solid options, some utility creatures, sprinkled in there, but just really good value. Between Golgari and Selesnya, there's a lot of good value in creatures. So the Shieldmate's got Vigilance, a 2/2 for 2. It's a great card. I mean, you'll play it on turn 2, on late game. You'll use it for. It's got Vigilance, so obviously you could attack with it and still second main phase use it for Convoke spells. So again, utility, right? Centaur Peacemaker is next. It's a 3/3 for 3 mana. So again, kind of on that curve, right? 2 mana 2/2, 3 mana 3/3. But when it enters the battlefield, each player gains 4 life. So this is a draw. This is the drawback, right? Each player gains 4 life. That's to me that's not a big deal for Selesnya, because you're convoking creatures in the 4, the 5, the 6, the 7 mana slots to make them cheaper. To that 4 mana, it just brings you back to parity, or that 4 life brings you back to parity. And it's players, right? So it's not like each opponent gains 4 life, so you're gaining 4 life as well. So it's it is what it is. It's not a big deal. Stray's next. We already talked about this. You're going to play this in every green deck. It's just a solid card. It taps for mana in this deck, which is great. Rock Charger's next. We already talked about this in Boros. The same is true here, even more so, because giving your XX the elemental, giving that flying, that's a thing. That's a flying elemental thing right there. It's a 1/3, so it's a little on the fragile side. And trust me, they will go after it. So it's it's definitely a threat. Letter of Champions next. This is I was kind of weary about putting this on this slide and not on the trap cards. You have to be really cautious about this one, right? So it's a 2/2 for 3 mana, which is okay. Its second ability, let's go over its second ability first. It's 5 mana, 3. So it's 3 generic, 1 green, 1 white to create a 1/1 white soldier token with lifelink. That ability is kind of throwaway. And it's a mana dump, when you don't have any cards in your hand, so you can still create creatures. But its first ability is kind of interesting. So when it attacks, you may tap any number of untapped creatures you control. The champion gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each creature tapped this way. So it's kind of like being able to use your 1/1s and your 2/2s that are useless mid to late game are able to pump this thing up. But at the end of the day, you're still attacking with those things theoretically, but you're attacking with one creature, so kind of it's like a shitty banding type of ability, where you're not getting their ability, but you're getting their strength. They can't, they got to tap, so like you're better off trying to give your guys vigilance and attacking with the 1/1s and hope that you can go wide. I really, the more and more I talk about this, the more I feel like this is a trap card, right? I mean, there's probably the magical Christmas land where you can, give a creature this creature unblockable or trample or flying with the charger, and that targeted sense, like where you targeted evasion, that's a thing, like that's a possibility. But again, you gotta, the 3 spot is very crammed here, right? The charger costs 3, the champion costs 3. So turn 3, you're playing the charger. Turn 4, you're playing the champion, and then turn 5, now you can attack with bolt if the charger's still alive. And at that point, you only have turn 1 creature, turn 2 creature. You have to attack with the charger to give it flying. So if you have a 1 and 2 drop in play, you can make this thing a 4/4 flyer. So, and that's turn 5. Like, see, like this is a rough one, guys. This is a real rough one. I think it's got some upside. We'll leave it here. It's an uncommon, so you're not gonna get a ton of them. In your sealed pool, I would probably stick with 1 or 2. I don't think I would go much further than that. The Woodshaper's next is a 2/1 for 4 mana. Enters the battlefield. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. You put a creature or enchantment card from among them put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. We're going to talk about it in a little bit. Selesnya's got a lot of enchantment, quote unquote, removal spells. So this card is fantastic. Getting the creature back, you're going to have a ton of creatures in this deck. So it's a body with a thing. So here's the Anthem effect we're talking about. Inspiring Unicorns of 4 mana 2/2 at uncommon. When it attacks, creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. That's if you can get 2 anthems off of this thing, you're in luck. Keep in mind it's creatures you control, so the unicorn itself becomes a 3/3. It doesn't say other creatures you control, so it benefits from its own anthem, which is great. Rosemane Centaur is next. It's a 4/4 for 5 mana with Convoke and Vigilance. So yeah, if you can get this thing for if you can get this thing for 4, you're in the black, like for sure. Even 5 mana 4/4 Vigilance is still a solid card. It will end games. It attacks. It blocks. It does all the fun things. Pack Beast is next. It's a 5 mana 3/3 with Vigilance. When it enters the battlefield, tap down 2 target creatures your opponent controls. Your opponent's controls. Your opponent's control. This is just, again, we talk about win conditions, right? Turn 6, turn 7, turn 8, you got a board stall. You top deck this, play it, tap down their 2 best things, and just swing. The other thing that this kind of breaks the combat stall is creatures with death touch. So, like, not necessarily the biggest creatures, but if they've got like one of those rats or one of those the poisoners, you could use this to tap those guys down for now and then attack in. Although removal would be perfect for those, but just again, very versatile. So plus a 3/3 body with Vigilance isn't bad at all. A lot of vigilance, which is great because of Convoke, right? They've probably figured that out. All right, so now we kind of got some removal and things like that. So we got Prey Upon is back. 1 green mana common. Target creature you control fights. Target creature you don't control. You're gonna have big things in this deck because of Convoke. Conclave Tribunal is next. 4 mana Convoke. Enters the battlefield. Exile a target non-land permanent opponent controls and until Conclave Tribunal leaves the battlefield. Great card. Just a good all-around card. Collar of the Culprit. Whew, that's a tough one. Tongue twister there. 4 mana, instant speed removal. Destroy target creature with a toughness 4 or greater. Again, we kind of were talking about those board stalls, right? You got your 4/4s, your 5/5s, and things like that, and they've got their board filled out. This is a great way to kind of break that parity. Play every one of these that you open, right? If you have 3, play 3. You have 4, play 4, because you will find targets for sure. It's instant speed 2, which is even better. So like for those creatures like in Is It that get +1/+1 for casting instants or sorceries, like the Dreadnoughts or whatever. I think it was the Dreadnoughts. Or is that +2/+0? I can't remember now. But anyway, the +1/+1 things and the counters and all that stuff. So, it's a thing. Here's the Gorgon again. Again, different guild, but still a great way to hold those creatures back. And Selesnya needs that as well. So, a solid 3-drop. And here are your finishers. Elemental, Equinox, and Siege Worm, all great cards. Convoke. You got Hexproof, you got Flying, you got Trample. Siege Worm's the common. The other 2 are uncommon, so you probably won't see as many as the first 2. But any one of these, any 2 of these, any 3 of these, if you get one of each, play all 3 in your deck as your finishers. If you get 2 of them, play 2 of them. That's kind of what you're going for. So yeah. Let's see here. So up next is the we talked about how you're going to cast the spells, and you got Convoke and things like that. But the one thing that's really kind of interesting is there's no like tap for mana creatures. I didn't see any. There's searching creatures, right? So we've got a couple searching spells and searching creatures. So Flower and Flourish is up. 1 green or 1 white. Search your library for a basic forest or plains card, reveal it, and put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. This is a great turn 1 play. It's a good way to make sure you hit your land drops. It's good for mana fixing for 2-color decks, for 3-color decks even. So like if you're in Golgari and you're splashing white, you can play this and go find your plains. Vice versa, if you're in Boros, you can play this and go search for a forest. So just some really good versatility when it comes to other guilds. But being able to make sure you hit your land drops in Golgari or in Selesnya, there we go, is very important, right? I mean, Convoke will only get you so far. But making sure you hit those land drops early on is key. You probably won't play the Flourish as much, maybe for a finisher. If you splash black, we'll talk about here in a minute, and can get a hold of that assassin where creatures have to block it. This is a good way to give all your creatures +2/+2 and possibly win the game, kind of like we talked about, or B, giving it +2/+2 and being able to block multiple things, or being able to attack and choose 3 blockers to kill, while still getting through a ton of damage. So there's some corner cases where you'll get Flourish to really work for you, but Flower is really kind of where it's at. District Guide is next. It's a 2/2 for 3 mana. When it enters battlefield, you search your library for a basic land card or a gate card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle your library. Again, this can go in the Golgari deck for mana fixing, for even if you're just green-black. But if you're, green-black splash blue, green-black splash white, whatever it is, this could be your card to go in your Golgari. Likewise for Selesnya. It's not too bad. Again, it's a utility creature, right? It's a 2 mana 3/3, or excuse me, a 3 mana 2/2, which is but you're getting a land card out of it. If you didn't play, if you play this on turn 4, haven't played your land yet, you can play this. Go get a gate for mana fixing. Play the gate. Obviously, the gate comes into play tapped, and then you're ready for your next turn. So let's see here. Curious Root is next. It is a 4-mana sorcery at uncommon. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards and or gate cards. Put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. Just a great way to ramp on turn 4 from 4 mana all the way up to 6 mana on your turn 5. Possibly get that 7th mana on turn 5. Like if you draw a top deck a land or whatever, that would 7 mana on turn 4 is you're in Selesnya, even in Golgari for that matter, is even a possibility. Okay, so here's your combat tricks for your green spells. So this could possibly go in Selesnya or Golgari, take your pick. Might of the Masses is 1 green instant for at uncommon. Target creature gets +1/+1 for each creature you control. Now, this works better in the Selesnya deck, obviously, because creatures are going to survive. You've got tokens, 1/1s and 2/2s. Whereas in Golgari, you're probably not going to have as many creatures on the battlefield. I mean, 2 or 3. But then again, like having 2 or 3 creatures, this is a giant growth, right? But if you can, this is going to end games right here. Like especially in the Selesnya deck, right? You got 6 creatures on the 6/1/1s or heck yeah, 6/1/1s, right? And you attack with all 6, right? And they've got 5 creatures. Well, whichever one they're not blocking is now getting +6/+6, attacking for 7 damage. So Pack Favors next. It's kind of a overgrowth with giant growth. Excuse me, giant growth with Convoke. 3 mana. Target creature gets +3/+3 until end of turn. It's just a great card, right? Being able to give a creature +3/+3. Essentially, if the best case scenario is you give, put the power and toughness just over your opponent's creature, so you'll basically trade the pack's favor for their creature, keeping your creature back, which is great. Pause for Reflection is your fog for the set. 3 mana with Convoke. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. It's all combat damage, not just combat damage to your creature, so just be cautious of that. Next up, we have one last combat trick in Selesnya. It's 5 mana. Kind of win the game, right? Untap all your creatures. They gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn, right? So you attack in, and either they try to kill your creatures, you give them indestructible, or they take the damage and they try to attack back in for the win. You play this, untap, block, and then kill them on the backswing. So it's pretty straightforward. Play one of these, don't play more than that. All right, so let's talk about real quick 2 different splash colors for Selesnya, because I feel like they really kind of need help, whereas with Golgari, they were kind of set, they were pretty much set. They really didn't need too much help in the form of, filling out their deck. I feel like they had some really good utility. So adding blue to Selesnya is actually pretty solid, and for a couple different reasons. And here's 3 different examples of what you get from adding blue at the common level, mind you, right? So maximum altitude, target creature gets +1/+1 and gains flying until end of turn with jumpstart. So if you can cast this twice in one turn, or even once in one turn, and once again, being able to get that extra point of damage across, but the flying is really kind of where it's at. The evasion in Selesnya really isn't that strong. They've got a few tramplers at the top end, if you get those, right? Because I think we looked at 2 of them were uncommon, 1 was common. Siegeworm was the uncommon. This is a way for you to kind of make sure that your 4/4s that have vigilance are going to get through for 5 damage or whatever twice, in over the course of 2 turns. Then it's also, I know we talked about removal spells, right? In the form of enchantments in white. This is adding blue gives you just another set of removal spells, bounce spells and things like that. Capture Sphere is a perfect example. 4 mana flash. Tap down a creature, it doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. So this is a way to kind of lock out your opponent's best creature. It's got flash, so you can, I know in the Selesnya, flash isn't going to be as prevalent because you're going to want to play your creatures on curve. But once you curve out, and maybe you have this in your deck, you have this in your hand, and you're like, you can choose not to play your Siege Worm and let them play their finisher. You flash this in, remove it, then play your Siege Worm, right? The other benefit too is your convoke, right? So your creatures cost less, so you can maybe convoke a creature into play and play this at the same time. So, and then also game winning card, early game, and well, not really early game winning, but late game winning card, but early game blocker. Great on curve. Pass Wall Adept is 2 mana, 1/3, and then target creature can't be blocked this turn. Again, in Selesnya, this is going to be like, you play your game winning card on turn 6. On turn 7, when it can attack, you play this and then make it unblockable. That's how you win. That's game winning cards, right? So removal, evasion, super evasion, like all good cards. You could also add black. And one of the things that you would add black for is if you were lacking in removal spells, right? If you didn't get any of those enchantments, or you didn't get any of those destroy target creature with power or toughness greater than 4, or whatever, adding black is a great way to kind of hold your hold your opponent back with the poisoner. We already talked about that. Dead weight's a great way to get rid of those early game creatures. The dreadnoughts, the drakes, things like that. And then Deadly Visit, while expensive, destroy target creature, then Surveil too. Obviously, Surveil is not as good in Selesnya because it's looking for cards on the battlefield. But being able to thin out your deck, being able to improve your draws is a positive, incidental positive rather. So adding blue is a great way for finishing the game, right? And then adding black is a great way for removing creatures so that your creatures can get through. So 2 different kind of ideas for you there. But at the end of the day, 2 great guilds, creatures, very creature heavy, lots of combat damage. Looking forward to playing against and with both of them. And I'm just super excited for this set. It's really living up to the Return of Ravnica that I remember. So can't wait to hear your guys' stories. Let me know what kind of guild you're looking at playing. Between the 2 guilds, what do you like? What do you guys like the most? Between the commons and uncommons. But I kind of want to hear about it. Leave it in the comments section below. Thanks for watching. Really do appreciate it. Make sure you get subscribed if you're not subscribed. Check out our Twitch channel, twitch.tv/72DPI online. We've got a couple different podcasts that go live there. The Mandrain podcast will come back shortly after the pre-release for the new set. Thanks for watching, guys, and have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow.